Alright, finally back from my hiatus, and what better way to start it off than with another video that I promised a few months ago, the Makima versus Gojo. This fight is an atrocious stomp. It is up there with some of the worst one-sided fights that I've seen people recently try to discuss, like Kumagawa versus insert such and such name, because they lose, and those are ridiculous, but we're not going to dwell on that right now. Right now, we're going to talk about this fight. A fight that basically is the embodiment of one person is overpowered in the context of their own series, another person is overpowered in general. So without further ado, let's just get right into this with Gojo Satoru's abilities. Gojo is built like your typical visual novel protagonist, which is actually going to be something I bring up in another video I have on him being an absolute failure, but I love him for it. And this is one of the reasons why. As he has the typical visual novel build of abilities, all of his abilities are incredibly simple. Mainly two things, Limitless and the Six Eyes. The Limitless allows him to do things like blue, red, and purple. Blue being a force that is capable of pulling things in, red being a repel that is able to hit with twice the force of blue, and purple. Something that I will get into elaborating later on when it's relevant, but many of you I'm sure already know what that is, or at least you think you do. He has the ability to use teleportation. He has his domain expansion, which is the unlimited void, which is an ability that allows him to flood his opponent with 6 months worth of information every 0.2 seconds. And now, while it's never specified, I think the months worth of information is that a regular human being would intake, and not something like a speedster or someone who is beyond that of a regular person at all. And since we're on the topic of his domain, I do think it is important to note that, first of all, these domains do not actually represent the power of a sorcerer. They're an aesthetic that comes along with the actual embodiment of someone's technique. Mahito does not create an endless blank void. Dagon does not actually create an island. And if these domains were actually based off of power, Jogo's domain would actually be even larger than Dagon's, not the Fire Mountain that it is. It is Fire Mountain because, again, it's an expression of Jogo's true technique, part of his jujutsu ability. It has nothing to actually do with scaling to raw power. That is why his appears as something that is smaller than Dagon's, because these are not genuine creation feats. These are clearly based off of concepts found within series like Bleach's Inner World or Yu Yu Hakusho's Territories. They have nothing to do with being actual feats of creation. Next, Gojo has his reverse curse technique, an ability that allows him to heal himself. Now, as long as the damage is not A, directly to his brain and severe, or B, something that would tear him in half or blow his body apart in any way, that cannot be fixed. And finally, for now, the last ability that he mainly has that will be of use in this fight is the Six Eyes. The Six Eyes being the ability to replenish his cursed energy that he has used, and with the normal amount of cursed energy he typically uses in fights, he's able to replenish it faster than he's able to use it. But I must stress, this has nothing to do with his actual physical stamina. The overall amount of stamina Gojo has nothing to do with the Six Eyes at all, simply his ability to use his cursed techniques. But now onto the Makima section of the video. She has the ability to use a contract that is a life for a life, where through the sacrifice of one life, as long as she knows the name of the other individual, she's able to take the life of another. She has the ability to teleport through using animals or whatever it is she has control over to essentially engulf her body and then reappear somewhere else. She has her bang, which is the ability to essentially have a sort of power that just manifests on top of an individual that doesn't seem to cover any physical distance, has shown when it was able to actually tag the Darkness Devil, who has a barrier around its body. She has the ability to access the Cosmos Fiend, who has the ability to use a technique known as Halloween, an ability that will hit you with all the known information essentially within the universe. She has the ability to use telepathy that goes across dimensions, has shown when she spoke to the Spider Devil, who was in hell. She has the ability to manipulate others' minds and their consciousness, along with their memories, has shown when Nayuta is able to control the War Devil, make her think she's a dog, has shown when she's able to make Aki have false memories of the past and forget things, and also has shown when she's able to just outright manipulate the mind of Power and the Angel Devil. Speaking of this, she also has the ability to just outright control other people, cause them to do what it is she wants to do. Now, misconception about Makima's ability is the idea that she has to actually beat you to control you. Incorrect. She beat Pochita twice. She never wanted to actually control Pochita. Power, she does control her even after Power got up. The only reason Power was able to get out of it was the same reason Angel was able to get out of it, because they had some sort of strong emotional attachment to another individual that momentarily broke the actual link and connection they had with Makima. She was then able to use it right back on them and control them again. especially as shown in the case with Angel. But beyond her ability to just control people, she has the ability to resist existence erasure. She has the access to pretty much every single form of enemy that was faced within the context of Chainsaw Man outside of the Darkness Devil. She has the ability to use the Future Devil. She has the Hell Devil at her disposal. The Hell Devil is someone who can essentially take someone and transport them to another dimension. She has the Angel Devil, who has feats like being able to pierce Pochita's body. A Pochita who, by the way, was struck by this attack according to Makima's plan, because again, she never actually wanted to kill Pochita. She always wanted to actually just cause him to be hers. She never actually went all out in the series from what we saw. But the attack that she used with Angel was one that just seemingly tore apart space, opened a rift, and then shot this spear-like object at seemingly the speed of light, or at least to where it appeared like light. She has the ability to cause organ failure and attack someone internally just by looking at them, in which the rebuttal to this being, well, why doesn't she do this to the Devils in Chainsaw Man or many of her opponents? One, she is again typically holding back, and two, these are beings who can be split entirely in half and still regenerate and come back like Katana Man. So not anywhere near the same thing as what you see in Jujutsu Kaisen, where people have reverse curse technique. She also has access to the Zombie Devil, and these are mainly the abilities that we know of that are going to be relevant for this discussion. Now I have to talk about the relevant scaling, and to do that I have to talk about what exactly it means within the context of both series to be considered the strongest. Now, within the context of Jujutsu Kaisen, to be considered the strongest like Gojo, it is in the sense that he is the strongest overall. Not that he is literally the strongest at every single thing individually. We know this because Gege does things like tell us that, first of all, Yuta has more cursed energy than Gojo does. Gege also tells us that Sukuna has more cursed energy than Gojo does. Gege also tells us that Kenjaku and Gojo are pretty much relative physical strength. Gege had to go out of their way to tell us that Gojo was the fastest Jujutsu sorcerer, which before now was still called into question considering the fact that he can teleport. And when it comes to the fights within the series, again, the main issue that people had with fighting Gojo, even with Sukuna in the latest chapters during their fight in the series, it was, how do I get around the limitless technique? It didn't have anything to do with how strong Gojo was overall. It's not that he's weak per se or anything like that. And while sure, his strength in comparison to everyone else would have been called into question much more than it is now, the point is, never once in the series was this narrative, I hit so hard and I move so fast and I'm just beyond everyone else. Even if we take a look at Jujutsu Kaisen 0, which is where Gojo originally showed up, because everyone always likes to say, well, Gojo was done with the expressed intent that he is the strongest in the ceiling for the series. But within the confines of Jujutsu Kaisen 0, he was literally surpassed by Yuta. If you think he was being serious when he said he'd have to risk his life against Rika in the beginning of that story, way before she ever awakened, way before Yuta ever hit back Flash, and obviously Yuta isn't stronger than him now because Gojo trains, as we know, but the fact that Gojo even trains and is constantly moving the goalpost shows that no, it's not a matter that he's just this guy who was always ruling and reigning over everyone else in terms of power. And again, he has things like the Limitless, Six Eyes, the Hollow Purple, which again, we're gonna get to later. I haven't forgotten about that. But to try to say and equate him to just being greater than everyone, just because he is the alleged strongest, is ridiculous. Especially when statements about him being the strongest are made throughout the series and by Gege when people like Heianera Sukuna existed, someone that he is not stronger than. And also, that leads to the fact that it likely isn't counting people that we didn't see or that we didn't know. On top of the fact that this meant that he's the overall strongest. And this includes people like Yuki Tsukumo. People try to say that he equates to the black hole. Yuki, I love Yuki. She's great. Her technique, virtual mass, and how she's able to use it, that's great for her and the length that's able to go. Gojo's technique has absolutely no correlation with that one whatsoever. He has absolutely nothing within the story that would at all insinuate that he is stronger than that black hole, or that he even has anything on the level of that black hole. Because he is overall the strongest does not mean he is literally the best, as I have already tried to establish at literally everything. So, within the context of Jujutsu Kaisen, the most consistent scale of power that they have is the hypersonic tier, which isn't to some extent using Death of the Author, especially when we have things like the subway incident where it took him nearly 5 minutes to kill 1,000 transfigured humans in a very tiny space. And Gege clearly has tried to backtrack on some of the speed that he had prior in the series, but we're going to ignore that for the sake of this video. but the destructive power is more consistently in these city level tier, where 15 Finger Sukuna, who was almost at his full power, is stated that he would have been harmed by Maximum Meteor and even bothered to get out of the way. Gojo, who had to train also while being sealed in the prison realm, and then train another month on top of that to fight this 20 Finger Sukuna, who, yes, he would be stronger than 15 Finger. He has 5 more fingers. He is not a Google stronger. It is ridiculous when people just try to say, well, someone's stronger now, so that means they're just far stronger, far greater than anything they ever have been before. That is not a quantifiable thing to say. And looking at the increases in power, go from city level to having 5 more fingers does not mean that he would at all realistically be in any other tier of power. To say he's like in the multi-city level, that would be fine, but just to try to wank him and highball them just to say that because they got stronger, that means they're just in a completely different tier and now they're blowing up planets is entirely ridiculous. And also, one more point when it comes to why the amount of cursed energy he even has matters. If we look at someone like Ishigori's Cannon Blast, if Gojo was to do it, and Yuta were to do it, and Sukuna were to do it, he would have the weakest of all 3 of them. Just to note that. Now for the Makima section of things, this is a lot more interesting. And for those of you who aren't satisfied with what I just said about Gojo, let me get this out the way. I'm going to be lowballing Makima for the reason that if I do use that high-end scale for Jujutsu Kaisen, I have to do it for Chainsaw Man as well. And do you know the feats that take place in Chainsaw Man? Devils in Chainsaw Man are always stronger than the very concepts that they are based on. We see this in pretty much every single case that they exist in. Now, I'm not going to go into theoretical devils that could exist, like the fact that there should be a fear of light and the fear of the sun, but I don't need to, considering the fact that we have Pochita, who ate a devil who was the embodiment of a star whose light caused children to go insane. We had Pochita, who ate 2 devils who were the embodiments of other afterlives. We have beings that exist in that world like the Typhoon Devil, who like how other devils don't just embody the very concept that their name is based off of, but they embody multiple things that be considered enveloped in that concept, may in fact be the devil that also embodies that of storms. We have obviously Rize the Bomb Devil, who would be the embodiment of literally all bombs in existence and the fear of bombs, and likely stronger than any bomb that has ever existed to a large degree. We have things like War Devil, who's the embodiment of war, obviously used to have nuclear weapons and would likely scale far above them. We have the Darkness Devil, someone Makima, who I mentioned already, Embarrassed, which is going to be relevant for this power section. The Darkness Devil is literally the embodiment of darkness throughout all of existence within the Chainsaw Man verse. Not just throughout the universe, but likely throughout hell and any other dimension that darkness exists. So talking about the higher ends and scaling for Chainsaw Man, especially when you also have the implication that certain devils may or may not be transcendent beings, is way more consistent. So if I did give you the planetary stuff for Jujutsu Kaisen, it would just result in them getting absolutely obliterated, and that doesn't make this interesting at all. So now to get onto the actual scaling that we have present here, let's take a look at the Gun Devil. The Gun Devil, but through collateral damage, has devastated multiple cities, and we know for a fact that this is collateral damage because the Gun Devil was only ever targeting the actual civilians within the cities, not actually trying to damage them themselves. And we also know that when the devil was traveling around the earth, damage in certain areas was much greater than what it was in some of the places that we see where the kill counts are much higher. That means the collateral damage would be far higher, meaning we don't even get an actual showcase of the physical damage that it did in its full totality. On top of this, just for comparing the speed for these two, because again, as I said, I'm going to lowball Makima closer to Gojo's speed, but we do have beings like the Angel Devil, who was capable of creating an attack that was so powerful that it not only appeared to warp space, it also appeared to travel like light. We also have the comparison between the two series that I thought was interesting, where Gojo took, again, as I mentioned, nearly 5 minutes to attack 1,000 transfigured humans who were fodder and weak and weren't even fighting back. Well, Makima beat the Gun Devil, if I recall, in roughly about 5 seconds of it arriving. Oops! And Nita reminds you this devil was blitzing around the planet at hypersonic speeds and would later be cliffed heavily by a stronger devil. But to get back to her actual scaling in terms of destructive capability, it is worth noting, as I mentioned, she embarrasses the Darkness Devil. Now, why does this matter? Because the Fiends state themselves that the Gun Devil, and they know the full power of the Gun Devil, is literally just some devil in comparison to that of the Darkness. This matters very greatly considering the fact that Makima gets there for the price of a broken finger, while holding back, mind you, to not reveal herself or her abilities to everyone there, drops the gun devil and seems to give it internal organ failure from one attack. She got a broken finger and it got dropped, meaning she is far stronger than that devil. There is nothing that at all implies, at least from what we saw of the Darkness Devil, that it is ever even close to Makima's level of power at all. So what this leaves us with is that Makima is on a level that is consistently beyond what Gojo is capable of. Even if we lowball her, she's still power cliffing and going far beyond someone like the Gun Devil, who should at bare minimum be in the same range as Gojo and Sukuna in power. But for the sake of this, and to make this a lot more interesting, we're going to just lowball her to again say roughly that she is relative to Gojo. And now is where we start to get into the more, and I guess most interesting part of this discussion, which is how would the actual fight between the two of them play out if it took place. First, we're going to talk about just laying out how it would be on paper, and secondly, we're going to talk about it on a narrative level. But first, we have to talk about Hollow Purple, because I've held it off for quite a bit now, but I think it's safe to say Hollow Purple is not an attack that erases things from existence. Period. If we look at the chronological order of the series from when the attack appeared all the way till now, I don't know if the original translation ever actually officially has stated that it really is supposed to erase things from existence. But from Gege's own depiction of the attack, it does not do that. We see Toji, who was hit by Hollow Purple, and it does not erase it from existence. Especially when we see his soul is brought back, meaning even if it was in that one depiction, if that was the only time it ever showed up, even if it had erased him from existence physically, it doesn't erase your soul, which is already a problem for this fight. Secondly, when it shows up again against Hanami, does the attack do? Not erase Hanami from existence. It allegedly erased the arm, but the arm was then later regenerated, meaning it wasn't actually gone, or at least it wasn't erased from existence within the context of what existence erasure would be in Chainsaw Man. The next time it appeared was when Gojo shot a 200% Hollow Purple at Sukuna, and he blocked it. Not to mention that 200% existence erasure would allegedly be a thing in Jujutsu Kaisen, but anyways, then we have his maximum curse technique, and this is where we get to the fact that Gege Akutami was very specific in his depiction of what unlimited hollow does, because it does devastate the city and obliterates the city. But you know what it doesn't do? It doesn't do what Cleveland Dismantle did to the city, where it actually was a depiction of the city being erased. Gege specifically did not depict this the same way, because Gojo did not actually erase anything. We see tons of debris, dust, and the buildings that, unless you want to argue they have resistance to existence erasure or somehow planetary levels of durability, because you don't get around the fact that it's one thing to argue destructive capacity when something happens on a small scale and versus destructive range. But considering this is, again, something that is allegedly an existence erasure attack, the fact that it does not actually erase even buildings from existence is consistent with the fact that it has never actually erased anything from existence. Not to mention, since we are now in pretty much the win-con sections of this, not a win-con for Gojo, because if he hits her with this, it simply just won't work, because the way her contract is described to work, anything that is an attack will be converted to an illness or damage to someone else, meaning even if this had some sort of alleged existence erasure, it is an attack. And to explain away the misconception about Denji, he was a loophole because what he did was not considered an attack. And I'm not talking about when he hit her with the chainsaw, I'm talking about when he ate her and they essentially became one, as it puts it. None of that was done with the intent of an attack or malicious intent at all. So even if you tried to use some weird Gojo Sukuna love argument for this fight, which is ridiculous, but it wouldn't even be applicable considering the fact that, again, Denji was a loophole and was never doing anything he did out of an attack or any sort of malicious intent. Everything he did was done in love and care. Nothing was actually intended to harm her, so it did not trigger the contract. It is entirely different from anything Gojo would be capable of doing. So, to give kind of my final thoughts on exactly how this would play out if they came into combat, he doesn't have a way to counter her life for a life. She can get away from him at any point in time and use her teleportation and be capable of doing it. He can't trick her down. He doesn't have a defense for the Bang. He has no defense for the Cosmos Devil. He has no way to stop her from reviving her summonings. He has no way to stop her from manipulating his mind or his consciousness or his memories. He has no defense against control. He has no defense against the Future Devil and her being able to see minutes into the future. And considering the fact that she is such a planet minor. Anything he could try to do would fail. He has no defense against the Hell Devil taking him to hell. The Angel Devil might be able to unironically warp space. He has no defense against if she starts to cause organ failure or anything to happen inside of his body. And he also has no defense against the Zombie Devil. If we were to say that the domain expansion was to trap them all in it, not only would it not work, but then he wouldn't have Limitless to protect him. And for the sake of argument, even if it worked, the only thing the domain is going to do is act like a pause button, where over and over again, he's essentially going to be forced into a worse situation than what he just was with Sukuna, to where even if they stop momentarily, he does it like he did Jogo. All she's going to do is turn around, get right back up, and it's right back to square one. And he's going to have to keep trying to kill her over and over and over again, along with all these summonings and all these revives that he's not going to be able to do. He's going to run out of stamina. But that is if we even said that he lasted long enough to have that happen, but he wouldn't from all the damage and constant onslaught he'd be facing from her. Plus, I want to bring this up simply because I know that I've seen people bring this up in videos, the combat skill that both of them actually have. I'm sorry to inform some of you that Gojo isn't really a fighter like that, at least not when standing next to Makima. And what I mean by this is that it's delusional to think that he actually could fight her in hand-to-hand combat, considering his best skill feats come from Zero, where he displays a little bit of Wing Chun skill, and then after that he's bullying people who are far weaker than him and failing to take them out. He fails to actually hit Mahito on the train station, fails to stop Jogo, who just rips his own arm off to get away from him. He only got Hanami simply because Hanami let their guard down, and then the only other display of combat skill he's even shown is against Sukuna, and Sukuna is someone who wasn't in his Heian form, didn't have his forearms. His skill lies in his ability with Jujutsu, not his hand-to-hand combat, which isn't to say he's unskilled, but that is a big difference from talking about someone who would be fighting Pochita, who is considered the hero of hell. Pochita has feats like eating on Quan Chi, who we knew was the most skilled person in the series, even more than Kishibe, who prior to her was considered the strongest and most skilled devil hunter in history. She outclasses him to the point that it's not even a joke. He looks like a clown next to her and doesn't even want to fight her. Yet, when she and the devil hybrids tried to jump Pochita, who, yes, might have been slightly weakened, although he was still in the black form, even with the suit on, they all lost to him. Her jumping him lost, meaning Pochita in skill is far beyond what Quan Chi is even capable of. And yet, Makima, still thinking this was Denji, told him to get up, run the fair one with her, and then she completely embarrassed him. And this is again another example of her holding back, because the first thing she does, if you go back and read the chapter, is tell Denji, what do I have to do to make you give up on life? Because she never actually wanted to kill him, at least until he spit in her face, which was the last straw. But she was holding back the entire time that she completely embarrasses the number 2 in terms of skill in the entire verse. Gojo has no chance if this was just a straight up hand-to-hand combat fight anyways. But speaking of no chances, Gojo also can't kill Makima. He gassed down the train station after killing nearly 1,000 transfigured humans who weren't even fighting back. He literally was also stated to be fighting on instinct at that point. Pure instinct, meaning he was going beyond what he even normally had. Even with how much stronger he seems to have gotten, his stamina didn't increase to an extent to where he could kill Makima over 100 million times. Even if she stood still, it's literally impossible for him to win. Already established how the purple wouldn't work, and we also, because I was saving this ability, I didn't touch on this one of hers specifically just for this section, because I knew with her contracts she has the ability, as I stated, to send damage or illness to someone else if she is harmed. Now, if you actually look at that statement, that also should mean that people who get illnesses should still be under contract because they are still alive, and they should also still be able to be harmed. So not only does he have to kill her over 100 million times, because there are over 100 million people in Japan at the time, he has to kill her to the point that literally every single person would be dead, and he doesn't even have the stamina for that, even if she just stood still. Meaning, no matter what she does, even if she just let all her other devils run free and stood there and he tried to kill her, he could not do it. So essentially, what this fight I think boils down to is, again, Gojo is on paper powerful. Makima is actually a genuine threat, period. And this is essentially a worse version of Jujutsu Kaisen 0, where Gojo already had a chance of losing, when Geto was talking about not only taking on him, but all of Jujutsu society at once. This is far worse than that, considering Makima is not only far more powerful than anything Gojo's ever faced, even if you put them to a relative degree, he's never dealt with the degree and range of abilities she has, the versatility she has, and he's also all alone by himself. Personally, I don't think Gojo has any chance of overcoming the literal physical embodiment of the concept of control. At the end of the day, this is a complete 100% mismatch and stomp, in my opinion, in favor of Makima, with him having 0 win cons at the end of the day, and her win cons being almost anything she could try to do. If this fight actually happened, realistically, she would ruin his entire life, isolate him, and destroy him, and he'd end up no different than anyone else who she controlled. But that's all I've got on this topic, so like, subscribe, but most importantly, comment to help build the community. And while you're at it, give me any of the other topics that it is you might have.
Adachi. Adachi! Adachi!